ConductorPro Layout. ConductorPro provides users with the ability to maximize real estate within the specific programming tools required for their project. This tutorial will help familiarize users with the basic configuration of Conductor, including where to find common libraries and programming tools, as well as extended workspace configuration and custom layouts. It is assumed that you have already viewed both the ConductorPro Basics tutorial as well as the Weigl Device configuration and hardware configurator tutorials prior to viewing this tutorial.
Once again, we're going to return to a new timeline and reset our workspace to the default layout. From here, we're going to have a look at how we can custom configure our layout, tabs, and expansions within Conductor for our specific editing or recording task. Because Conductor ranges from simple animation to full-scale lighting and media playback, there's not a one-size-fits-all solution. At any time, remember you can reset the layout, reset to the default layout, or load a previous layout configuration. But first, let's look at some of the tabs that are available for selection within Conductor. Many projects do not require each of these assets to be active on the screen at all times. Therefore, we can disable things like DMX recording, input controllers, and keyboard shortcuts. Immediately, we've drastically reduced the amount of real estate that's required on the top of our screen. If we were doing a simple animation setup, we wouldn't require anything more than the timeline for creating our data, deployment for deploying our data, and of course, devices for actually finding our Pro Commander or Pro I/O devices. This can make things much easier if you have a programmer who is not as familiar with the timeline layout or the animation process. Going back under tabs, we can also find that we have a selection for tool panels directly underneath. Once again, a lot of these are not required once the project or timeline has been set up. Properties we always recommend. Layout we tend to recommend depending on the type of configuration that's required. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that off just for now. Let's go back and look at that one more time and see where it actually adds. See right here? So, for example, if we had an engineer that was setting up the process for the Pro Commander Pro I/O configuration, once we had the layout set up, again, that's our Pro Commander Pro I/O audio and video configuration, we can remove that layout because they're just working directly in the timeline, and this still gives them the ability to label and configure what the devices would show, playback, or record as, but not change the layout itself. I'll go ahead and leave this on for now because it can be valuable. The library is something we have not covered just yet in these videos, but you will find this later, and this is where we can store and retrieve movements. Generally, we say to leave it on because it can be very useful in the retrieval and storage of sets of moves and character sets of moves, but it does not require much real estate next to the Properties tab. The log is something we also always recommend, and this is at the bottom of the screen in the left-hand corner. The log is very valuable in showing you what is a completed and successful process, as well as any errors that might occur in Conductor. Should you have any kind of error or issue, this allows immediate resolution and or reporting to us to help resolve that issue. We do recommend always leaving the log on where possible. Audio, video, and command lists are also part of the layout's setup. The only one we routinely say you may disable if you're not doing any kind of logic would be the command lists. Connections, this is down here in the bottom right-hand corner, and the connections would show anything that was actually set up on your PC. Going down further, other things that can be turned off would be the audio mixer. Recording groups we always recommend leaving on, and of course the monitor is something that you could leave on or turn off depending on how advanced your skill set. Following down further, we can enable or disable tooltips and enable the info labels as we hover over any of our content. For advanced users, this might be annoying as you're constantly fighting the rollovers, but for an early on user, we do recommend this in most cases. Additionally, we'll point these out, but we'll not use these specifically in this video, and that would be expand all, expand groups, collapse all, or collapse empty. This would of course be during your timeline editing for groups and individual tracks, as well as eliminating any kind of empty track that you may not be using within a particular timeline. The focus of this video, however, is controlling the layout for a specific type of animation. For this example, we're going to do a recording group and an input group. So I want to go back and under my tabs, I want to bring back my input controllers. However, what I want to do is not actually use this the way it's configured. Input controllers will go over more in depth in the input, recording group, and real-time animation. However, I'm just going to throw in a couple keys here so we can see what this looks like. Once again, this will be covered in depth in a later video. Because these input controllers are directly related to the recording groups, I want these both at the top at one time. During my programming, I want to be focused solely on recording groups full screen so that I do not have to deal with the timeline data. Many animators prefer this heads-up approach, and this gives them the ability to do that. So in other words, what I've done is I've taken the recording group from the bottom, and I've clicked with my left mouse button and held, giving this a floating pane. Now, this is enabled for dual monitor setup as well as touchscreens and tablet. So I can take this to another monitor, I can take this to a tablet screen or another configuration setup, but in this case, I just want to dock this back up on top next to my input controllers. Now, why would I want to do this? Well, because I now have these input setup devices configured for my U key, and again, we'll get back to this in a later video, but just to show you, I now have a full screen that I can set up here as my recording group. I've reset my layout to a different setup with different tabs, different layouts, and the recording group, as you'll notice, is absent. I want to go back and reload that tab workspace. So if I go to load layout 1, don't see it there. I know I saved it somewhere. Let's try layout 2. No, still don't see it. Okay, and layout 3? Don't see it there. Well, let's try to see if I go back under Tool Panels, Recording Groups. Okay, Recording Groups was disabled at some point since I last used this computer. I want to make sure that Recording Groups are on before I actually toggle between these layouts. Notice that in Layout 1, or my default layout, this is back down at the bottom. If I go back to Workspace and I load Layout 2, that snaps up to over here on the right-hand side. So now if I bring this back next to my input settings, because that's what I wanted earlier. Now, wait a minute. Where is my input settings? Add those back. Okay, somebody has really changed things since the last time I used this computer. Let's go in and turn off all the things that I don't want. One thing I'm trying to point out through this example is that the tabs and the tool panels do not retain with the workspace settings. This is intentional during the setup of these recording layouts. So if I were to go back and now save this workspace as layout 2, I'm able to retrieve layout 1, which just moves recording groups to the bottom, or layout 2, which snaps it back up to the top. However, notice at no time do the tabs or tool panels change in their population. This is by design, and this is how it is set up to allow the user to not lose any of these recording groups on different monitors. Remember, under Workspace, we can reset the default layout, or we can make any of these our default workspace. So if I go back to Load Configuration 1, now I did bring back devices. The only way we can modify tabs and tool panels is to go under the Reset. This will bring things back to the factory configuration again. So if I reset the default layout, I'm back where I want to be. Let me go to Load Layout 1. That's going to bring DMX recording. That wasn't quite what I wanted. Let me go to Load Layout 2. Still not quite what I wanted. Layout 3. Okay, that's what I want, but I still don't want the deployment tab for right now. And I also don't want the devices tab. So and recording groups. Yeah, we'll leave that, but get rid of DMX recorder. So this is what I want. I'm going to go ahead and save this now as layout 2. So anytime I call up layout 2, this is what it's going to look like. If I go back under Make Current Layout the Default, I'm able to set this as my startup. This means if I go to New Timeline, I want to discard the current changes. Every time I make a new timeline, this will be my default. This does not affect whether or not I additionally turn on or take away tabs or tool panels. Remember, those are not saved as part of any of the default layouts with the exception of the factory default under Reset. So at any point, I can go back and I can reset the default layout and reset all of my devices to clear out those filters of the tabs, the menus, and the workspace. Again, this is a custom user setting that allows quick change between a playback, recording, or specific type of workflow for a user. This concludes our video on the layout configuration of ConductorPro. For more information, please visit faq.weigl.support.